We just wanted you guys to be around a little bit longer, for sure. You know.
How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Does that work for you, Austin? Yep, you good? Mariella, you're good?
Yep.
All right, so what were your general takeaways, Jason, I'll start with you for today?
No, it's always exciting to bring this many players into the organization, and to start the day off getting a defenseman like Blake in the mix. Obviously, we've drafted a lot of forwards over the last couple of years, but to get a player of Blake's pedigree, the size, the skating ability, it was a situation where we felt we wanted to move up and grab that, and then I think it just sort of went out through the rest of the day. We've talked a lot about taking the best available. In years past, we haven't forced it, and we've drafted more forwards. This year, we didn't force it, and we drafted more defense. So overall, we're really happy about the players that we added to our organization here.
Robert, from your standpoint, I mean, how did things kind of shake out for you throughout this draft, and how you had players ranked versus where they fell for you?
No, just like Jason said, today we felt that Blake was there, and we thought it was important to get him. And then, the day unfolded exactly as he said. Like, we were following our board. The defensemen that were available were there. It actually played very well for us, I thought.
How intense were the discussions yesterday between taking the center or taking the big V-net Urtka? Is that a point of discussion and argument at all?
Oh, look, I think this draft, it was an exciting draft from the standpoint there was a lot of talented players at the very top of the draft. I think everyone's clear has been talked about. There wasn't the McDavid, there's not the McKinnon, the game changer to change your franchise, but a ton of players that, as you watch the playoffs, had the elements for success in the playoffs. Centermen, defensemen with size, big wingers. So, look, there was a lot of discussions from throughout the year, but especially from our meetings on just, what would be the best fit from that. But obviously, we came away extremely excited about Jake, and sleeping last night, I think both of us slept very well having Jake in the mix here, and we've talked about it before, just building through the center position, a young player like Jake who has the hockey sense, two-way ability. Yes, does he need to improve his body and get stronger? We can talk about pretty much every player that we've drafted this weekend has to do that. But what I think a common theme was with the players that you'll get to know over the next few days here at development camp, they're a driven group. They're looking for information from us, and we look forward to working with them over the next couple of years.
Robert, what do you specifically like about Reynolds in that pick?
Obviously he's one of the youngest players in the draft. That helps. The development is still there at this young age. He's an excellent skater. He's tall kid, he's 6'3". There's room to grow physically. He moves the puck extremely well. Plays a very mature game actually for a young kid. Moves the puck up, joins the rush, is always in the right spots. The physicality is coming. We felt very comfortable getting him there.
Made a trade to move up from number 38 to number 36.
Yep.
Was that, did the thought of that trade come about before round 2 started, or as players started to come off the board?
We had some discussions with different teams at the start of the draft there. We felt, with Blake still on the board, we were trying to find a way to get up there. We liked the trade just because it wasn't that we had to give up another one. I know we moved back in the second round, but we still were able to get that third round pick in the mix there too. But we were working at it, trying to find a way to get up there to make sure that we had a chance to select Blake.
Were there any other players you would have considered moving up for, or was Blake the choice?
Blake was the one that we were certainly looking for from the defense group. You saw some players that went off the board in the mid-first and late-first from that perspective, and we wanted to step up and certainly get Blake.
What is it that you like so much about his profile as a player, would you say?
I just think the size, the skating ability. Look, he's played on the international scene already. And then when you get to know the kid and get to interact with him, you realize, look, obviously he understands the National Hockey League coming from his father, but there's a drive there and stuff. There's a willingness to work at his game, understands his weaknesses and what he has to improve on, and I think that's what's getting us really excited. And then that's with all of them, right? At the end of the day, we're drafting 18-year-old kids who have a lot of work ahead of them. And I believe our development staff, led by Jeff Tamalini, Corey Murphy, has done an excellent job with some of our young defensemen in our system. And we're going to certainly put Corey to work here starting this week.
Did either of you ever cross paths with Vernon in your playing careers or throughout your hockey careers?
I didn't. I don't think I did. I would have to check, but I don't think I did.
sort of a guy that you've bumped into and everything, but haven't spent much time with him. No.
Jason, as an organization, you guys haven't dabbled much with Russia up until this point. To
Yep.
get Maxime, what do you like about his game, and what is the challenge still of maybe pursuing Russian players in the draft and everything?
No, look, it's a situation of, being in UFA. We have Zazovoy over in UFA and stuff too, and understand that a little bit. Max was down at the camp held by Dan Milstein last week that Robert was down there watching there and was able to interview Max there too. Again, a mature game that he has at such a young age, size, skating ability. I think that's going to be a common theme that you see with all of our defensemen that we drafted here today. We're hoping to get him here for development camp. It'll be great to have that interaction with him there, and certainly we understand the different options they have, but we feel very comfortable working with this agent to hopefully eventually get Max over here in a couple of years.
Because you mentioned him, what's the situation with Zazovoy at this point? Is he at a point where you're maybe trying to get him over here? Kind of, what's the situation?
So he's back in Russia for another year. It's going to be a great opportunity for him to be the go-to starter there. We're in constant communication with his agent, but we feel that's a great spot for him to be a go-to starter. He, I thought, had a great playoff run this year. Now it's a situation where he can be the go-to guy for the entire season.
And speaking of drafting players from organizations where you already have a player, you drafted Carl Amborn of HV71, where there's Oscar Mulgaard.
Yep.
Did he give you a scouting report on Carl?
Well, look, we have our Swedish scouts that we trust a lot over there from that standpoint. Obviously, in these late round picks, you're trusting the regional guys. Robert and his staff and the crossovers do a great job at the top of the draft. But in those later picks, you're trusting the regional guys to understand the players in there. And obviously, it's a group effort for it, but you're really relying on their opinions.
These Senators, first round last year, this year, a couple guys acquired over the last week or two. Is that depth, strength by numbers, or trade capital, or all of the above?
I think what we're trying to accomplish with Lane is to give him options out there. Obviously, the kids that we're drafting, we're so excited about younger players, but it's going to take them time. I think the fact that you're looking in free agency, you're looking in the trade, right? Everyone's still looking for centers. So the more we can have, the more we're going to take and stuff for sure. And I do think some of our players, especially getting into the league, you eventually want them to become centers. I think it is easier from a defensive standpoint to start them on the wing. So we will consider that. I think you look at a player like Jared McCann, we talked about this yesterday, Jared's ability to go wing center, it just adds a lot of different dynamics, a lot of different looks for Lane and our coaching staff. Because obviously I think you see it with our forward groups. We're still looking for chemistry within our lines, and the more options we can give Lane, we're never going to be a top-heavy team. We have to have 4 lines that can contribute, and I like what we've accomplished over the last little bit here.
Speaking of wingers, former first-rounder Edward, where is he?
Ed had a great year in our minds, having the opportunity to, be a go-to player for Czechia at the World Junior Championships this year, to be a 19-year-old in the American Hockey League. We didn't know at the start of the year how that would turn out. And the fact that he was able to be down there the whole year, go from it. Look, he has to get stronger like some of our other players, but we're ecstatic of the steps that he took this year. And you talk about Jake O'Brien's hockey sense, sort of creativity. It's the same thing that we still see with Ed, and we're going to continue to work with him over the next couple of years for sure.
Completely off topic, just for fun, but what's it like to have a Hall of Fame sister?
No, it's very proud of her. She worked extremely hard to get to this position. Great to see her being rewarded, and the fact that we could certainly do it with my family being right there was something very special for all of us.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Earlier you said that that Blake, you had him graded at a late first round. Is that what you said? Or
No, we just said the question was just some of the defensemen to come off the board in the mid first and late first and stuff. And look, we certainly had a high grade on Blake. It was a player that was certainly high on our board, and that's why we didn't want to miss on him. We wanted to. We only moved up, I believe, 2 or 3 spots to get him, but we didn't want to wait in that situation. We wanted to make sure we got him.
Do you have a sense that any of your unsigned junior players might have an option, a college option this coming year? There's been reports linking Clark Caswell to Denver, whether it's draft picks today or otherwise.
It's the difficult part of the process right now. It's constantly changing, and we're trying to help them out with working with their advisors, working with their agents from that standpoint. I do think it changes daily, but it's something that we'll continue to work with it, but don't have any announcement from that standpoint right now.
And how'd the remote draft work for you guys generally? And do you have a preference on how it works next year?
At the end of the day, that's probably above our pay grade. But look, I get the Central Draft, the celebrating the game, and being all together from one standpoint. I will also say, yeah, it took a little bit longer to go through this process, but there's a familiarity of being in our own offices and just being able to communicate from that standpoint too. So from our perspective, we certainly see the benefits of both scenarios.
Jason, you guys have taken a goalie, I think, every year up until now. You didn't this year.
Yep.
What do you think? Does that speak to where you feel about your goalie depth across the organization as a whole right now, or is it just that the right one wasn't there when you were on the board?
I think we certainly had some goalies that we felt very comfortable picking if they were there in the right spot. It just didn't, as we sort of talked about. I know there was a run of defensemen this year, but it wasn't as if we forced it. It's just how our list, went out, and we've been very happy with the goalies that we've selected over the last couple of years. We feel it's a strength of our organization what we have coming. Obviously, with Coco being the prize, but with Sarin and Vazovoy, I think we have a lot of depth in that opportunity, in that situation. And then obviously we're ecstatic of where Joey's taken the steps. You go from an American Hockey League goalie leading a team to the Calder Cup finals to a situation now of being a go-to starter in the National Hockey League, going to World Championships. We're ecstatic of where he's developed, and we're looking forward to seeing where some of these young guys can go in the future too.
When you were looking at your draft board before the draft, did you have a sense that it was a strong defenseman draft, relatively speaking to others, or is it really just the way the board fell and that just happened to be the best player at the time?
It was a strong draft up top. Like there was a lot of defensemen in it, but also a lot of these defensemen, and you saw the run on them early. Kind of a mid from the 9th down, and then Blake was pretty much in our mind left there, and then you had another run early in the 2nd. So there was a group of defensemen that were strong, and I felt like the teams would go and reach for that. Same with the forwards, and at the top they were really good forwards, and there was the situation with the best player available, and that's what we wanted.
Is the perceived upside of Jake higher than what Berkeley's was?
That's a good question. They're a little bit different players and the same players at the same time. Extremely intelligent playmaking centers. Jake is 6'2". Barkley is an extremely slippery, skilled guy. So I think that having those two guys in the system, that gives you so much talent that you can work with. And the other thing with the centers, it's way easier, and I know that when you're center to play wing, it's way harder to go from wing to the center. So usually the centers can play wing anytime, but it's harder for the wingers.
You can't ask Robert to choose between his prized possessions here and stuff. It's tough, very difficult.
Jake said he's going to go work with Paul McFarland on faceoffs this offseason too. Does it help having some familiarity with him to have Jake go work with him as well, knowing Paul?
Look, there's to me, we're just looking for our players to focus in on their weaknesses and to improve their game, and that's what we love about Jake is there's that dedication to working with Paul to understand this is an element that he really has to improve on. Look, Gary Roberts, who has had some interactions with us in our organization too, working with Brantford, that's another situation where we feel very comfortable that he's going to be able to help Jake a lot and stuff too. So, as we've touched on before, the fact that these kids know their weaknesses, know what they want to work on, and they're going to, wherever they have to go to improve it is something pretty special. And it's what we've been really happy with Berkeley over the last year or so, working with Jeff Tambellini, and we're ecstatic that Jake's doing the same thing already.
Thanks, guys.
All right, have a good one.